Good morning, good evening, and good very late evening if you're watching from Australia. Hi, this is Ash, and welcome to the live stream. Um, all of you have been really supportive, and there have been so many comments over the last couple of weeks that I've been going live with Anirudh, and what we are trying to do here is a UiPath, you know, public learning series called Your Path to UiPath Mastery, and we are just trying to help everyone along. So Anirudh is a newcomer to the RPA world, and UiPath is just one way he is trying to make it into the RPA industry. And while he goes on to this journey to learn and master UiPath, we thought it would be a very good, uh, helpful way to see or let everyone or invite everyone to come and see this journey, so that some of you who may also be in a similar situation trying to learn and get better at UiPath might actually want to follow or take some notes from his journey, or his learnings, so that we can make it just a little bit easier for you to go on this journey. And a lot of you have been really supportive. We've had some engagement on previous live streams, and also I've heard from along other social channels from you that that you found this series somewhat helpful. So I really thank you, all of you, for that. And to continue on that journey, today we are about to go into session 3 of the Your Path to UiPath Mastery live series. Although, because of some internet and power connection issues, Anirudh unfortunately is not able to join us today. So I thought maybe we'll take this session in a different direction. So we will review how far our previous 2 sessions have come, where Anirudh is currently, and instead of a third catch up, or the follow up on that session, we will cover a few things that he brought up as concerns or questions last time, and then we'll build up on that by maybe going into a little bit of a UiPath Studio overview, where UiPath Studio fits overall in the UiPath space as a whole, or as a platform. And then we will go into a little bit detail into RE framework and some other types of frameworks or templates available from UiPath Studio out of the box. So we'll start with, let's say, where Anirudh's current journey has brought him. So I'll bring up on my screen uh, a session or a progress tracker that we've been using to track his journey. And some of you who have been playing at home following this journey, it'll be a good way for you to review, or just catch up or tally as to what you've been doing. And if you have any notes, or if you have any updates to share with us, I'm happy to uh, call them out in the chat. So feel free to post your messages as you go along. Thank you. Let me bring up the progress tracker. So this is what we've been following, or uh, you know building it up as we go along. This is a progress tracker that we've been setting up, and what we've done so far for Anirudh is that I think in the first week, or before we started this session, I set it up for him so that he could at least just get started on the UiPath platform. And the first few things that I asked him to do was to join the academy, UiPath Academy, where all the tutorials and resources for UiPath platform are available, and you can set up a free account and start learning right away. In addition to that, to make the most of the resources available from UiPath Academy, you should set up a cloud account, which is Automation Cloud is the free/enterprise platform offered by UiPath, which is basically your own orchestrator, your own automation cloud. It incorporates everything that UiPath platform has to offer. Most of their offerings are already on-prem as well as on cloud. So you can get a taste of everything that UiPath platform has to offer by setting up your account, free account on Automation Cloud. So the URL for that is highlighted here on your screen. At the same time, I also asked Anirudh to set up a UiPath forum account. So UiPath Community Forum is the second best resource, I would say, after UiPath Academy to learn and get answers to some very specific questions that you might have about UiPath as you go along on your journey of learning the technology. And community forum also, you can use the same account, ideally use the same email or same way of logging into all these three systems. They allow similar login methodology. So if you log in with your Google, or if you log in with your organization's account, or you can set up a normal email password account. If you use the same account across the three, they're synchronized with each other, and the information that you the journey that you take on under Academy automatically shows up on to the UiPath forum account that you own. So we've covered all of that in the previous sessions. I'm just revising, so it may be going a little bit faster. If that is the case, then please feel free to ask questions in the stream. Thank you. Now, next, I got Anirudh to complete the Developer Foundation course. This gives you a detailed overview of all of the things that as a developer you will be able to tackle, or you'll be tackling in a real world scenario. So the foundation course basically prepares you for that at a basic level, and then anything that you particularly want to focus on, you can dig into that particular topic by finding its specific course on, again, UiPath Academy. So the Developer Foundation course is also available on Academy. The link is behind the text, but as you can see, it also belongs to academy.uipath.com. I'm happy to show you the link here. It's hosted on Academy under learning plans. So if you go to learning plans on UiPath Academy, it'll take you to the RPA Developer Foundation. So just to briefly recap, you'll find the learning plans link up here, and then you can find the specific plan that applies to you. So Developer Foundation basically just gets you started. If you really want to become an advanced RPA developer, you can take on that specific course. There is something else called Citizen Developers. So Citizen Developers are they use a different type of Studio, UiPath Studio version, as we will briefly we will see briefly in today's session. But the Citizen Developer Foundation prepares you for that kind of role, where you don't have to be a technically very advanced user, or someone who knows programming languages in detail, and yet able to use UiPath Studio to meet their automation goals, or some specific targets that you would, some specific processes that you might like to automate without knowing too much about programming languages. So that's a very good foundation course for you to take on if you're someone in that role. A couple of other things that I asked Anirudh and anyone who's following this to do was to become an active member on forum. This helps in many ways. In addition to actually learning or helping the community, it also gives you some visibility across the other UiPath community users, because of which your obviously your connections improve. I've made connections on LinkedIn and other in my professional network because of the activity that I've had on the UiPath forums, and some of them are actually friends now. So definitely that's a big recommendation from me to be active on UiPath forum and answer and interact with the regular users on the forum. uh, Kind of tied into that is you know, highlighting your LinkedIn profile. So everything and anything that you accomplish in your UiPath, on your UiPath journey, you should update your LinkedIn profile to reflect that with the latest information about your diplomas or certifications that you've completed. After you complete each course or each learning plan like that, you will be able to download a diploma, which comes down, you can download it in the form of a PDF file, but also you can link it onto your LinkedIn profile through UiPath credential management system, and all of that information is also provided on UiPath forums. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments so I can give you some specific information on how to get the certifications linked onto your LinkedIn profile. Now, other than these steps, then in the last session, that was last Sunday, we covered RE framework, and what I wanted to do there was to have a quick, 10 to 15 minute brief overview session into RE framework, but then we kind of got into a little bit of a detour, and we went on to discuss what arguments are and how workflows work typically, how, what are the differences between the variables and arguments. So that was a bit of a journey to in a different direction than where I wanted to go. So maybe today we'll cover a little bit of like a brief overview of RE framework, and then maybe some, if there are any questions, we could go into those details, or I have some ideas about what we could talk about specifically to RE framework and how to make it easier in your mind. Because if you're someone coming to the UiPath Studio as a whole with a very new user side, then RE framework can be a bit too much at times. So breaking it down mentally helps it, you can digest it in little chunks, and then that way it's much easier to understand and get familiar with as you go along. So we'll do that. Also, I asked users to watch the try catch block video, which in general explains what exception handling is, and that's not only limited to UiPath, but the video is specifically built using showing examples that apply to UiPath Studio. So it will explain to you what exception handling is in a bit more detail, but also then talk specific about how it's done in UiPath and what are the things that you should know and remember when you're dealing with exception handling in UiPath. So that was pretty much a recap of what we've been doing, and so we'll move on to the next part. The next part that I have planned for today is I wanted to bring up a few concerns or questions that Anirudh had in our previous sessions. Most importantly, one being he asked me an interesting question, and even though it's a simple question, it can be a bit loaded, because many times many users, I realize, don't have the right context in speaking about UiPath Automation Cloud. And what I mean by that is UiPath is a very big company. They offer much more than just UiPath Studio or just UiPath Orchestrator. There is a lot at play, and if you are coming to RPA as a newcomer, then some of the some of the keywords or some of the catchphrases can be really overwhelming, because we are sometimes looking at RPA in one colored lens, but there are so many nuanced viewpoints towards the same platform, towards RPA platform, because there is AI involved, there is pure surface automation involved, there is citizen developer, as I already mentioned, there are advanced developers, there are business analysts, solution architects. Everyone looks at the same problem and has a different take, a different point of view towards it, and it might help to structure your angle of looking at UiPath, whichever component of UiPath you're using. So in this case, we are specifically talking about UiPath Studio, right? So I would like to first maybe establish a position of UiPath Studio in the UiPath world. So let's start with that. And for that, so this will probably help everyone watching this video. If you go to uipath.com, they've made it so simple to understand exactly what to expect from your, from whatever you're looking at in the UiPath world. So going here, I'm on uipath.com now, and if you just hover over the platform, platform menu, you will see that it's split into, well, now it's split into four different sections: platform, uh, discover, automate, and operate. So there are three main splits: discover, automate, and operate. Previously it used to be five different sections where there was a discover phase and a build phase and test phase, etc. But this is a much more organized, or they've kind of reorganized to make it simpler, to split the categories. So there's discover, automate, and operate. We will eventually probably talk about everything in these lists, but for now, when we talk about UiPath Studio, all of it is sitting under just one. So that should give you some idea as to how big the whole UiPath universe is. And when we say Studio family, that has further, um, you know, branches to it. There's UiPath Studio, there's UiPath Studio X, and Studio Web. So they are three very different tools in not just their look and feel, but also what they can or cannot do. So we will look at that in a bit detail. Going back to the platform view, so process mining, task mining, communications mining, automation hub, marketplace, these are other tools provided by UiPath platform, and yet none of these are really tied into what developers do inside UiPath Studio. Like I already said, it's just one part of the bigger picture, and UiPath Studio does sometimes integrate with some of the other items that you see in this list. For example, Studio can connect to Automation Cloud or Automation Suite, depending on whether it's in cloud or on premises, that is on prem, or it can connect to Orchestrator, it can connect to Test Manager, AI Center, Data Service, Document Understanding, all of these things. So Studio sits in the center, in the sense most of the automation programs are built in UiPath Studio. There are some things like UiPath apps, or I suppose, you know, automation hub, that some of these things may not directly integrate with UiPath Studio, but Studio is still a very essential part of the offering, UiPath offering, which is why it bears some, it is mention worthy in its own right. So getting into the UiPath Studio, uh, this description should give you some idea as to how they are different, but Studio X is specifically for the citizen developer program, or someone who comes comes at UiPath Studio from a business user point of view. For example, someone who has their Excel, some process that they work on Microsoft Excel. You may be using some processes that are completely based in Microsoft Excel. What Studio X offers, um, what is different in the Studio X offering, is that it will be much more Excel friendly and much more familiar to also the user who is quite used to using Microsoft Excel. It will make it very easy and very familiar in terms of like making it look like you were working with a Microsoft Excel file, only instead of doing the same thing again and again, you're actually building an automation that will then from that point on work on its own in Studio X. And that's a big difference between how Studio and Studio X function. uh, for Studio, if you know programming languages, that's a big plus. In Studio X, it's almost um, designed to make it completely unnecessary for you to know any programming languages or concepts. Your knowledge of Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Office is enough for you to build automations in Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Office. That's a very big difference. Of course, there are many other differences, but that's like that's probably a familiar example I can give you how to look at these two different tools. Studio Web is a relatively newer addition to the Studio family, and we could see a Studio Web session in future. But right now, I won't talk too much about Studio Web. Just know that it's a it's a tool that you can carry with you without having to carry your physical device like your laptop, because Studio Web by definition, or as the name would suggest, it just lives in the cloud. It's web based, so you don't need to necessarily have the code on your local device. It just lives in the cloud. You can access it from any web browser, and obviously that also means from any computer. So you never have to worry about having exactly your laptop or some kind of code repository synchronized to cloud so that you can access that code anytime. It is accessible at any time because it lives in the web, or lives in the cloud. That's basically the idea. Now, uh, the next part that I want to tackle, um, so sorry, so that was just about what UiPath Studio is all about, and we will go and look at UiPath Studio as a bit of an overview. But before we get to that, I wanted to tackle one more question that Anirudh brought up, and that was the interesting question, as I mentioned earlier. He said that um, when we use something in enterprise versus when we, you know, when we use UiPath Studio in enterprise mode versus community mode, it's different, or it won't have all the features. And I wanted to emphasize that that's not the case, because UiPath Community Edition is one of the strongest free available software programs that you can access if you want to learn RPA. And this is not just talking about UiPath, this is across the different platforms, across all the competitors, or even just like RPA technology as a whole. I think UiPath Studio Community Edition is a very strong way, very easy, and like in my opinion, one of the best ways you could learn about RPA platform. So I strongly urge you to download UiPath Studio and get a feel for yourself. So just to show you where that difference lies, I'm switching to Automation Cloud. So UiPath Automation Cloud, as I mentioned, just in context, this is the operate part. So Automation Cloud is basically where all of your services, most of the services, or most of the platform offerings you see in these lists are available or under Automation Cloud based on what what's your um, current subscription like. So for example, I can let me bring it out. So you will see some familiar names here. You'll see home, you'll see orchestrator, studio, apps, integration service. Most of the names available from here: studio, apps, integration service, and orchestrator. They're right here. So as I said, all of that is managed under Automation Cloud. um, there are other things such as actions, automation ops. This list is expandable, meaning based on the subscription that your company or your um, organization at UiPath level buys. So if you are a one person, one man army, one person army, then obviously you might have your own community edition cloud account, or you could be paying by going to an enterprise plan. But depending on what subscriptions you buy or you've been given, this list will change. So if you are looking at your own automation cloud, you might see a few more or fewer options depending on what you're currently going with. So going back to the question that I was referring to, as to whether community edition and enterprise edition are different. So first of all, I would like to show you how uh, you can go and get yourself the UiPath Studio platform. So just go and set up an account on cloud.uipath.com. Once you're logged in, you will see this kind of interface where you can access your orchestrator service. This is a community edition for first of all, so this is a free account. I didn't have to pay for any of this, and anyone can get at least these many services by just setting up their cloud account uh, for basically, yeah, free of cost. So once you are onto your automation cloud, what you can do is go to downloads at this in this menu. So you go to help and you go to downloads, and under downloads you will see it takes you to this page called resource center, and here you can download yourself a community edition UiPath Studio. This will give you an installable file, and then you can set it up on your local computer and just start using it. If you click on other versions, it won't show you any, because community edition automatically updates to the latest version offered by UiPath. If I were on an enterprise subscription, I would see two different options to download community edition as well as enterprise edition software. And in enterprise, you do get a choice to download a few different versions that are still in service, such as the one from 2023 and 2022, 21 and 20, going back usually 2 to 3 years. So that's the difference between community and enterprise edition. So because I'm on a community edition, that's all I have here. Once you've downloaded the UiPath Studio for yourself, you will get an interface that I'm bringing up on my screen now. You'll get an interface that looks like this. First and foremost, let me show you. This will be a bit too tiny, so if you will allow me, I'll try to bring it up a little. Okay, so I'm increasing the zoom or overall display settings just so that it's a bit clearer on the live stream. Sorry about that. Everything will be probably too big on the screen, but at least it will help us read some text that is too tiny. So as you can see here, I can see the community edition. So this UiPath Studio is running community edition. You can find out what version you're running by referring to this tab or this section of the screen at any time. And you might see a little bit or a few differences in your UiPath Studio. First and foremost, for example, you will be on light theme. So I prefer darker themes, which is why I'm used to this. You may be seeing a white. If that's your comfort level, then absolutely go for it. In the comments, drop whether you're a light, team light theme or team dark theme. Let me know, how many of the viewers are actually dark theme lovers. So, okay. Aside from that, a little bit of a, vain preference. Um, some other settings or some other differences with UiPath Studio. Sorry. by differences, I was about to go into profile switching, but before we get to that, I'll give you a quick overview of what you can do with your basic UiPath Studio. Again, I am on Community Edition, so this all of this is available to me free of cost. I didn't have to, get any kind of subscription, pay for any kind of subscription, and I'm already able to do all of this. So, what is all of that? I can create a local project and start learning, which is basically the obvious giveaway. But UiPath Studio already has done a lot. UiPath platform, they've given me a lot of templates to work with. So RE framework, as you heard me refer to it, it's called Robotic Enterprise Framework, and this is this is like the standard framework now, almost like an international standard as far as UiPath is concerned, on which most of the UiPath automations are built. There is always potentially, you know, um, and more arguments. There are more arguments for using RE framework than not. So by that I mean, by definition, we use RPA for things that need to be done repeatedly. So anything that you want, that you need to do again and again and again without changing much of how the process works, that means that kind of repetition would warrant the use of RE framework, because robotic enterprise framework is basically a as the description says, it's a transactional business process that follows best practices for large scale deployments. So it's been designed to use standard frameworks, or follow this best practices, but also do the same thing again and again in a very effective and very fail foolproof, fail safe kind of way, which is why RE framework is quite strong. But then again, I have a few others, as you can see, and also many more templates available at my disposal. So if you just clicked on more templates in your free community edition, you will be able to see all the processes that are available at your disposal. The document understanding process, for example, creates a business process that follows business best practices for large scale deployments of document processing use cases. What is that? Document understanding process is anything that involves PDFs or images to be scanned, or scanned images or scanned PDFs. Uh, the document understanding process is able to read them, process them, convert the scanned image into readable text, so that you can get that text and use it for your business process. For example, taking an image of an invoice and um, converting all of that information into readable text, and using those images onto sorry using the text extracted from the image in your business process. For example, using the invoice example, you could get the invoice date, invoice number, line item, individual amounts, and also the grand total. All of that information is readable into text form, and then that can be used for your accounts payable process, so that the amounts are automatically submitted into a database or whatever final input system you have, such as Salesforce or any other, and you won't have to look at that invoice manually, type it in, and then do it for every invoice that comes in. That's like one of the strongest use cases in the market, because every company deals with invoices on a daily basis, because they have that's how business gets done. You send invoices and you get paid. So that's a very strong example. There are some other processes, and as you can see, there are like so many templates that are already freely available. You are free to explore all of them, and if you find anything interesting, or any questions about a specific one, we can probably discuss them in a future episode. So let me know what you think. Moving forward, there are other tabs on the UiPath Studio. There's tools, which you can use UI Explorer during building a surface automation. We will see them in a future episode probably. Uh, there are some other options like repair tool for Microsoft Office, project dependencies, mass update tool. Their descriptions are there. They're self-explanatory and frankly not used that often. So there will be a need. If you're dealing with a real live project, there you might need to use one or more of these. But most of the times you'll find yourself using UI Explorer, yes, heavily, and also UiPath extension. So for UiPath Studio to be able to communicate with any of the browsers such as Edge or Chrome, you need to install a little script, or sorry, a little add-on onto your browser, such as you will see here. A UiPath browser automation has been installed. A plugin has been installed which allows UiPath Studio to talk to my browser. Moving back into Studio, there are some plugins such as Git and SVN, TFS. These are source control, meaning code repository management software plugins. So I have Git enabled because I use Git for synchronizing my repositories. So you'll see that. Tied into the Git is the team tab. So I'm jumping onto the next one because we already covered templates, and also the Git kind of relates to the team. So once you have Git set up on your machine, you can clone a repository, or if you're already working in an existing repository, you could use these other options. They become enabled based on what project you're currently in. So because I'm not inside any project yet, I can clone a repository and basically open it from cloud. Source control or Git is a whole other topic. It's a world of its own, so we won't touch that now, but just know that this is basically how most of the code most of the teams in this world, when they more than one person, more than one or two people are working on a project together, source control is how you get things done, because that's the easiest and the most efficient way to make changes to the same project and still have no conflicts, so that no one's work gets wasted or gets duplicated. So that's why source control exists, and we will tackle that in a future episode, based on if you have any questions. I will set up a different session for that in future. Now moving on to the settings tab. So other than the light and dark theme, there's also a few other things that you might find relevant or useful, such as if you want to switch to a different language or reset settings. Let's we will just move over the telemetry. This is a bit technical and not really relevant. This is in community edition, it is setting it's sending the anonymous usage data by default, but in enterprise edition I think we have control over that. There are some design choices you can make, and these are relevant to actually building the automation. So we are not there yet, we haven't started building an automation, so we can probably come to these at a later date in a later session. I can choose the default location my projects are made. Manage sources, these are the sources where or how the packages or how resources are connected or made available to UiPath Studio. Again, this is design time discussion, so we won't get into a lot of that just yet. The other thing I wanted to talk about was change profile. So you saw earlier that we are able to use Studio and Studio X. So these two are very different tools in their look and feel, and also their behavior, as I mentioned before. So let's look at how different that is. So here you can change between Studio and Studio X profile. So currently I am on UiPath Studio. Let's switch to UiPath Studio X, and once it restarts, as you can see, the color slightly changes. The UiPath Studio has a distinct blue, while the Studio X is sort of a more teal color. The settings also change probably a little bit. For example, the templates available to a Studio profile versus a Studio X profile are different, and these are, as I mentioned before, uh, these are built specifically for business users with business users in mind and their needs in mind. So the templates will be things, as you can see here: download file from website. It's a very simple task, but then for someone who comes from a business point of view, or like a business user who doesn't necessarily deal with downloading, file downloading on a daily basis, they may not be that familiar, or they shouldn't have to worry about how they will go to a website, or what kind of logic they need to understand to download a file. So they could simply use a template as an example and work with it. Or there are integrations directly available, such as enter Excel data into website, or save desktop Outlook email. So from icons you can see what system they are predominantly working with. There may be templates where one thing talks to another. For example, downloading something from Outlook and then putting that information into Excel. So yeah, there are combinations of that sort available, and you can explore the templates and try them out for yourself. Uh, we didn't get into an actual UiPath Studio project, so I suppose we if we did that, we could come back and see what a Studio X project looks like. But then let's do the inverse, just for uh, just for the sake of comparison. Let's start with a new Studio X project, and here, as I can see, I can create a blank task or I can create a template. Let's go with blank task because I just want to mhm. Let's create a blank task, and I want you to just pay attention to what the interface looks like, because then once we go back into Studio, you will see some of the differences that you see between the two. So as I mentioned previously, that the look and feel is a bit different. So it's different but also same, meaning the general position of some of the things that you'll use frequently is the same, such as the main canvas is always in the center, or how you configure some of the options is always on the right. We will see when we go into UiPath Studio that the interface is similar in those aspects, but then also different because some of the activities available or some of the options available up here are different for Studio X versus Studio. So I'm going to skip the tour. I strongly recommend that you take the tour when you set it up on your machine, because it'll help you um, you know with some guidance as to how to best use the Studio X profile. If you are a business user, or if you are someone who's just starting on UiPath Studio now, I would strongly recommend that you try it out for yourself, so that it'll give you a good idea of what you can do without knowing a lot of programming languages. So some of these some of the activities that you see here won't be available in Studio, or vice versa. some of the activities available in Studio won't be available here. um, we'll use this activities tab as an example. The type of activities that you see here are categorized as Excel or file folder or mail, which is specifically Outlook, or there will be app and web automation, some SAP related activities. So when you explore more, you'll see that Microsoft Office, there's a very specific emphasis on Microsoft Office software. But if you now switched back to UiPath Studio, you'll see that none of these folders exist in this type of order, because that's not the focus of what UiPath Studio can do. Some other things, for example, this data manager, you won't see the data manager tab available in Studio. You will see, however, the properties tab. So if I brought something over, some activity from here to the main canvas, I'll be able to modify its properties and use some of the things that I can do with the activity. That's just an example. Let's switch back to the Studio profile, and you might have noticed that even the UiPath Studio loading screen is blue versus the UiPath Studio X has a teal loading screen. So just a bit of an attention to detail from the product developers at UiPath. Now, as you'll see, the My Business automation that I just created is also showing up under UiPath Studio. However, when I was on the UiPath Studio X version, or UiPath Studio X platform, it didn't show my existing automations that I have here. The reason for that is there's a one-way relationship between Studio and Studio X. Any project in Studio X can be opened in UiPath Studio, but once you do that, it can't be opened back in UiPath Studio X again. The reason for that is Studio X is a bit of a limited limited feature version of Studio, which means you could do some things very well in UiPath Studio X. As I said, it's been designed for business users to easily build simple automations. And then once they've done that, there may be some customizations or some logical improvements to be made, where a UiPath Studio developer can come in and make some adjustments so that it can be run at scale across the organization, for example, or it could be expanded to the whole team, and then you could customize a few elements of that so that it doesn't just work for that one user but the whole team. And those things can only be done in UiPath Studio for various reasons. So there are certain features that are only available in UiPath Studio, not Studio X. And this is why it's been designed such that you can use a Studio X project in UiPath Studio, but then not vice versa. So once you've done that, it can't be reopened in your Studio X profile unless you have a separate copy of that is still pure Studio X only. Now let's get into a Studio project that I created in the previous session, and this is an unedited version of RE framework. So we discussed UiPath RE framework in the last session to some detail, and in today's walkthrough I've already used quite a lot of time in giving you a general overview of what UiPath is and UiPath Studio, where exactly it sits in the whole picture. So I'll use the rest of the time as a challenge to see how much we can cover in the approximately 10 minutes that I have left in the original plan of this session. So it was supposed to be a 1 hour long session. I'm about 9 minutes out for that time to be over. So let's see what we can understand, because so a reason to set up this challenge, or kind of like to to challenge myself to talk about this as fast as possible, and I'm not about to go on a rap, but the point is that every time I've tried to find a good resource on YouTube to learn about RE framework in simple ways, I've found videos that always go up to like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, some are or some that are even 2 hours long. And they are absolute gold in terms of understanding RE framework to the last detail. Because if you are about to go and build an automation in the real world, that is in a real business application that actually makes impacts on systems and different people's accounts, you need to be absolutely sure in knowing what RE framework is doing for you and what it's not doing for you. But then that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a resource or something that that can quickly give you an overview of what I mean. Why the hell do we need to use RE framework? First of all, so I mean, just because I said so, or just because the template's description says that this is the best thing there is to deploy across large scale application, that shouldn't be the only reason you go with RE framework. There is real value in understanding what RE framework is doing and whether it's really the right thing for you to use in whatever automation you're designing. So just to give you some context, any as I mentioned in the same session earlier, that the the whole crux of robotic process automation is to do things really fast and really efficiently, but they are the things that it does need to be repetitive, which is without having to learn much or making a lot of cognitive decisions where someone must tell the robot what to do. If you can identify a process where simply a list of things exists, and for all of them without much variation the robot has to do the same thing. It could be something like, let's say, um, checking users, or let's say there's a in a class of 70 students, you want to get their forms and take only capture their name and roll number and enter it into a system with along with their score for that exam. So it's always the same. You just pick it up, and all you have to do, or all the robot has to do each time, is read the name, read the roll number, read their score, and put it in the same system. So there's hardly going to be a variation, and that's just a simple example of what a repetitive process might look like. So for all the 70 students you have to just do the same thing. That's an excellent use case for using RE framework, because the the main concept in RE framework is that you do something at the beginning, which by name initialization. So you do something at the start. For example, it could be setting up a new Excel spreadsheet where all the 70 students names and details and scores are going to be stored, or it could be a database, it could be a website where you are preparing the class results. So as long as there is one one system, so it could be just preparing that in advance, and then once you start processing them, you basically repeat a quick loop of getting transaction data, which means read the user or sorry read the student's name, get their first information, and then follow a process which is a step by step walkthrough of what exactly the robot needs to do. For example, read this PDF, read the name, read the roll number, read the score, and enter it. As soon as that is successful, go back, get the next student, follow exactly the same steps. Get the PDF, read the roll number, read the name, read the score, submit into a database or whatever that system is. Successful? Okay, go get next transaction data, do the same thing again. Best case scenario, nothing fails, and 70 students get read, their scores, their roll numbers, their names, everything gets read, submitted into the same system. All of that goes fine, 70 students done. comes back the 71st time, it says no more data, and then end process. End process, you can set stuff up like submit my final score sheet, or class results, publish class results. That could be the last thing that you do after all the success, after all the students are successfully recorded. Or it could be close connections to the database, or save the website, save the Excel file, send it to principal, something like that. So again, like I said, at the beginning you do something, and then at the end you do something that will complete the process, and then everything in between which needs to be repeatedly done, that sits between the get transaction data and process transaction. Now that, and then that's the best case scenario. Like I said, 70 students, all of them recorded properly. Let's say something fails. Based on how it fails, meaning whether it was something that we could have prepared against and recovered from, then you could recover from it and get continue processing more transactions. For example, let's say one of the students, their scores could not be recorded for some reason, or let's as an example, the student was absent. So I don't have this I have the student's record somewhere where I'm referencing from, but I don't have their answer sheet or their score sheet. So then I'll say user student's answer sheet not found, and that would be recorded as a business exception, meaning I expect that some of the score sheets are not available, won't be available, and then that I'll just simply throw a business exception for that one case. But the other 69, if it happened, let's say on the number 30th student, so 31st and onward, they will still be processed. All of their sheets or their scores will still be recorded. But if something that I didn't plan for, I couldn't plan for happened, for example, whatever system I'm downloading the PDFs from, if that system went down, or if it was, let's say, kept on a network drive and I lost connection to the network, then that's something I couldn't, I could anticipate that might happen, but obviously I won't know exactly at what point it might start to happen. Or something like this student got 70 B marks, or instead of 78, there was a typo and it came up as 7B. So instead of 78 marks, now the student got 7B mark. That's not a real number, so I won't be able to record that as a number, and something fails. So I couldn't plan for that. So in that case, the system will throw a system exception, which is something that you didn't plan for but still happened. And then in that case, we just go over and start the whole process again. Now it changes from every process to process. So in some cases, throwing a system exception may not be the best course, because what then you have to account for is, are you ready for all the 70 students to be processed again, or do you want only the rest of them to be processed in a new result set? So in this example, it probably won't make that much sense to just basically throw the whole thing out and start over again. So then you have to decide how you want to handle those, and that's what this system very efficiently does, because the beauty of this is that all of the exception handling, meaning how the business exceptions are thrown, or system exceptions are thrown, those things are very well designed and very well documented. All of the catches are all properly placed, so you don't have to worry about that. All you have to worry about is just going in there and modifying your process. So if you open the process workflow, it's basically an empty workflow right now. It simply says started process and then says you invoke steps of the process. So it's an empty template that's been given to me. So I don't have to worry about how that transaction is then handled, because that's already been handled. If that fails, even that is handled. Like if failing the transaction failed, even that is automatically accounted for. So we will go into try catch block again um, I strongly recommend that you go and watch the try catch videos separately on my channel. I'll also link that in the description of this video, and if you have any questions, drop them in the comments on the original video or this video. I check all my comments, so I'll be very happy to address any specific questions that you have. But um, this is the best part about RE framework, that all of the framework is already built for me. I have to just understand exactly what to put in my initialization block so that I only do it once. What is the exact let's say number of steps of the process that are to be done repeatedly. For example, you know how some tutorials or some you know cooking websites or some kind of recipe books, they'll say do step 1 and then do step 2, 3, 4. If x happens, then repeat steps 2, 3, 4 again. And that's what you need to identify, where you say, okay, my step 3, 4, 5, 6, they are repeatable. So step 1 and 2 need to be done only once, and then I'm set. And then from step 3, 4, 5, 6, I have to do it again and again. And once step 6 is completed for all of the items, then step 7 and 8 will be the final steps of the process. That's all I need to work out, exactly what step to put where, and the RE framework will take care of the rest. That is pretty much the gist, 12-minute gist of what RE framework can do. And there are lot more, lots of more details in that framework that we still need to dive into. But I think if you can understand this main purpose of using RE framework, then you will be easily able to determine by looking at a process to say, oh, you know what, I don't think RE framework is the best framework for me to use if I want to do a certain process. For example, if there's a process where you just use step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you might have to repeat step 4 and 5 only if X happens. So 1, 2, 3, they only happen once. 4 and 5, maybe you have to repeat them, let's say 2 or 3 times. And then step 5, 6, again, they're never to be repeated. Is that really a process that you would like to build in RE framework? Probably not. It will also depend on how long step 4 and 5 take. For example, if step 1, 2, 3 take up like 10% of the main process, like the whole thing, and then step 4, 5, they take up like the rest of the 70% of the process, then yes, you should use RE framework still. But if it's something like step 1, 2, 3 themselves take up about 50%, and then step 4 and 5 take up about 15% each, so you're already covered for about 80%, out of which only 30% is repeatable or repeated. In that case, there's probably a very strong argument that you don't need RE framework, in which case you could simply go and create a standard process instead. The process is basically, it'll just give you a very plain empty workflow, and just like we got with my business automation, you basically just got a blank workflow, and then you can fill it up as you like. So start with a blank project to design a new automation process. That might be a good course of action in that kind of process. So that's what I wanted to do in this session, by saying, if you can understand what RE framework truly is for, then you may be able to make an informed decision as to whether you really need to build a project in RE framework or something else. As an example, I used the document understanding framework to explain what an invoicing process looks like. If you created a document understanding project using the template available on Studio, you can try it for yourself. It'll look vastly different from the RE framework that you just saw. It's a very linear process, but it's still a framework. So that framework just caters to a very different need, where it already builds many components for you to deal with PDF files, because typically with PDF files what happens is you need to first digitize them, meaning make a digital copy, which then gives you what is the text on that PDF, and then based on that text it can extract the information out. So it has certain very fixed steps. Document understanding is a very different topic, so we'll cover that again in a future session. But in document understanding you have to follow a very linear process, but then still there are many um, catches or many pitfalls or potential pitfalls that you need to avoid, and that's what the document understanding framework gives you. It readily builds some fail-safe mechanisms for you to always digitize the document successfully, always read it successfully, always extract it successfully, or if something goes wrong or something goes in a way that you didn't anticipate, then what to do. So it will have its own different type of exception handling and dealing with all of those problems therein. So it's very different from RE framework, but it's a framework after all. So the point of bringing up document understanding framework is that the the RE framework, the looping that you just saw, it's not always the best way to build an automation. But in most cases, when we are building RPA processes, they tend to be repetitive, and more often than not, repetitive for the most part, and only non-repetitive for a little bit of an initial part and a little bit of end part, such as, like I said, connecting to systems or logging into websites, and then at the end sending out summary reports or submitting the final complete set of results and stuff like that. So in those cases, RE framework hands down is your best friend to build automations. But other situations, there may be other answers or other alternatives available. If you would like a more detailed explanation of RE framework, we will set up a session to just from start to finish go about RE framework, and then I will publish that onto my channel in advance so that you can join and ask questions as we go along. I am just reviewing the current stream. I don't see many questions pending currently, so just give me a moment. Okay. Right. So for the next session, this concludes the session 3. But for the next session, we will have Anirudh come back on to join us, and in session 4 we will review the progress again and move to the next step, which is how to then use RE framework to proceed with an actual automation. So we'll build something that works, and in the process hopefully help Anirudh and you to move along your journey on the UiPath learning path. So your path to UiPath Mastery session 3 is now finished. I'll see you in session 4 next Sunday live. Goodbye. Good night.